In the quiet suburban town of Oakwood, where diversity brought both vibrancy and tension, an ordinary act by a 16-year-old girl became the spark for extraordinary change. Jasmine Carter, a bright and ambitious teenager, set up a lemonade stand to raise money for charity, driven by her dream of making a difference in the world. What began as a humble initiative soon turned into the epicenter of a confrontation that challenged the town's deep-seated prejudices. The arrival of her father, Marcus Carter, a man with a hidden and powerful identity, transformed the situation into a pivotal moment of reckoning. This gripping story unravels how a simple lemonade stand became a catalyst for justice, unity, and hope in a community in desperate need of change. Oakwood High School and Jasmine Carter. Oakwood High School was like many suburban schools, a melting pot of cultures, aspirations, and challenges nestled within a community that was as diverse as it was divided. The school sat in the heart of a picturesque neighborhood, with tree-lined streets and neatly manicured lawns framing its imposing brick facade. But beneath its serene exterior lay the growing complexities of a town grappling with change. Over the years, Oakwood had evolved from a predominantly white suburban enclave into a mosaic of ethnicities and backgrounds. For some, this change was a welcome embrace of diversity. For others, it sparked resistance, misunderstandings, and a yearning for the good old days. Within this setting was Jasmine Carter, a 16-year-old student whose presence seemed to exude determination and purpose. Standing at an average height, Jasmine's deep brown eyes often sparkled with curiosity, her braided hair tied neatly as she balanced the responsibilities of being a teenager with dreams that stretched far beyond her immediate world. While her classmates chattered about TikTok trends, weekend plans, or the next big game, Jasmine's mind was firmly set on a future as a doctor. She wasn't just academically inclined, she was compassionate, thoughtful, and deeply empathetic to the struggles of those less fortunate. Jasmine had grown up in Oakwood, witnessing the community's evolution firsthand. She understood the underlying tensions better than most of her peers. It wasn't just the occasional side glances or whispered comments in the hallways that told her about the divisions, it was in the unspoken segregation of cliques, the disparities in resources, and the subtle ways teachers sometimes underestimated students like her. But Jasmine had never let those things deter her. Instead, they fueled her resolve to succeed. For her, becoming a doctor wasn't merely about achieving personal success, it was a calling, a mission to help others and break barriers in the process. Her father, Marcus Carter, was her anchor. A quiet and composed man, Marcus rarely spoke about his work, leaving a veil of mystery around his life. All Jasmine knew was that he worked for the government, a vague description that sparked endless speculation among her friends. But what Marcus lacked in specificity, he made up for with his unwavering support for Jasmine's dreams. He often told her, "The world may not always be fair, but you have the power to make it better. Never let anyone tell you where you do or don't belong." It was this philosophy that inspired Jasmine to set up a lemonade stand for charity. To many, it might have seemed like a simple school project, but to Jasmine, it was her first step toward making a tangible difference. The local community center, which served as a haven for underprivileged children and struggling families, was in dire need of funds. The center's peeling paint and outdated facilities were a stark contrast to the laughter and hope it offered to those who relied on its services. Jasmine knew the funds raised from her lemonade stand wouldn't be enough to fix all its problems, but it would be a start, and sometimes, a start was all that was needed. The decision to set up the stand also stemmed from Jasmine's observations about how small acts could ripple outward to create meaningful change. As a frequent volunteer at the community center, she had seen firsthand how something as simple as an extra set of hands during after-school programs could transform a chaotic afternoon into a productive one. The idea of selling lemonade was not just practical, it was symbolic, a way to show her peers and neighbors that even teenagers could take initiative and contribute to their community. But Jasmine was no stranger to the challenges that came with taking a stand, literal or metaphorical. Oakwood's changing demographics had created a tension that often simmered just beneath the surface. While some neighbors were supportive and open-minded, others viewed any disruption to the status quo with suspicion. Jasmine knew there would be those who dismissed her efforts or criticized her for trying to fix problems that were, in their eyes, unsolvable. What she didn't anticipate, however, was just how far some would go to undermine her. On the day she set up her lemonade stand, the skies were clear, brilliant blue, and the summer sun bathed Oakwood in a warm glow. Jasmine had spent the morning carefully preparing, mixing fresh lemons and sugar into pitchers of ice-cold lemonade. She hand-painted a cheerful sign that read, "Lemonade for charity, $1. Help support disabled children." She chose her spot strategically, setting up on the sidewalk near the school where foot traffic was steady. Her folding table, covered in a bright yellow cloth, stood as a beacon of hope and initiative. The first few hours went smoothly. Neighbors stopped by, dropping spare change into her collection jar and offering words of encouragement. An elderly woman from down the street commended Jasmine's efforts, telling her, "It's young people like you who give me hope for the future." Children passing by with their parents eagerly tugged at their sleeves, asking for a cup of lemonade. Jasmine's heart swelled with pride as she watched her small idea come to life. However, beneath the surface of this idyllic scene, trouble was brewing. Jasmine was about to learn that even the most well-intentioned acts could attract hostility, especially in a community divided by lingering prejudices. The arrival of a police cruiser, its sirens cutting through the warm afternoon air, would mark the beginning of an ordeal that would test Jasmine's resilience, challenge her community, and reveal the hidden depths of her father's past. Jasmine's aspirations and the lemonade stand's purpose. Jasmine Carter had always been a girl with big dreams. Unlike many of her peers at Oakwood High School, who were content to drift through their teenage years preoccupied with social media trends and weekend plans, Jasmine had a clear vision of what she wanted to do with her life. She didn't just aspire to become a doctor, she felt it was her calling. It wasn't about prestige or financial success. For Jasmine, it was about making a difference in a world where disparities in healthcare left so many vulnerable. Her passion for medicine stemmed from personal experiences and a deep sense of empathy. She'd grown up watching documentaries about underserved communities and reading stories about children in remote villages struggling with preventable diseases. These stories haunted her, sparking a fire within her to contribute to the solution. In Jasmine's mind, healthcare wasn't just a profession, it was a lifeline, a way to bring hope and healing to people who needed it most. Her father, Marcus Carter, had always supported her ambitions. He would remind her that the path she had chosen would be challenging, especially for someone like her, a young black woman in a field where representation still lagged far behind. But Marcus also instilled in her the belief that determination and hard work could overcome even the most stubborn obstacles. "You're not just fighting for your dreams, Jasmine," he would say. "You're paving the way for others who will follow in your footsteps." Inspired by these words and driven by her desire to create tangible change, Jasmine conceived the idea for her lemonade stand. It wasn't just a school project, it was her first step toward making a difference in her community. The proceeds, she decided, would go to the Oakwood Community Center, a local hub that provided essential services to families in need. For years, the center had been a refuge for children needing a safe place after school, offering tutoring programs, sports activities, and meals for those who might not have had them otherwise. However, the center was struggling. Its roof leaked during every heavy rain, its shelves were bare of supplies, and its staff were constantly overworked and underpaid. Jasmine had volunteered there several times, helping younger kids with their homework or organizing arts and craft sessions. Each time she walked through its doors, she felt a mix of hope and frustration. Hope because of the joy the center brought to the children it served, and frustration because of how much more it could accomplish with adequate funding. The idea of selling lemonade might have seemed simple, but for Jasmine, it symbolized something much greater. It was a way to show that small actions, when done with purpose and sincerity, could ripple outward to create meaningful change. She wanted her peers and neighbors to see that even a teenager could step up and contribute to a cause bigger than themselves. The day she set up her stand was one Jasmine had been eagerly preparing for. She spent hours perfecting her recipe, wanting each cup of lemonade to be a refreshing reminder of the good that could come from community action. She painted her sign with bold, cheerful colors, carefully spelling out, "Lemonade for charity, $1. Help support disabled children." Her father helped her carry the table and supplies to the sidewalk outside the school, his quiet pride evident in the way he adjusted the sign to ensure it was perfectly visible to passers-by. As she set up, Jasmine couldn't help but feel a swell of excitement. This was her first step toward turning her dreams into reality. Each cup of lemonade she sold represented more than just $1. It was a step toward repairing the community center's roof, buying books for the reading program, and ensuring that children in her neighborhood had a safe and supportive place to grow. The response from the community was heartening. Neighbors stopped by, dropping spare change into the jar and offering words of encouragement. "It's so wonderful to see young people like you taking initiative," said Mrs. Johnson, an elderly woman who lived down the street. "You're going to do great things, Jasmine. I just know it." Parents walking with their children stopped to buy cups, their little ones giggling as they sipped the cold, tangy lemonade. A local mail carrier paused on his route to drop a few dollars into the jar, tipping his cap to Jasmine as he said, "Keep up the good work, young lady." But while the support was encouraging, Jasmine knew not everyone in Oakwood was as enthusiastic about change. She had seen it in the way some neighbors complained about the new people moving into the community, a thinly veiled reference to the growing diversity in the town. She had heard the whispers at school, the way some students mocked those who didn't fit their narrow definitions of what was normal. Jasmine was determined not to let these attitudes deter her. She had her father's voice in her head, reminding her that resilience and courage were the keys to overcoming adversity. What Jasmine couldn't have anticipated, however, was just how much resistance her small act of kindness would provoke. While many in the community supported her efforts, there were others who saw her stand as an affront, not because of what she was doing, but because of who she was. For them, Jasmine's lemonade stand wasn't just a fundraiser, it was a symbol of the changes they resented, a challenge to the status quo they were desperate to maintain. As the sun climbed higher in the sky and the day wore on, Jasmine noticed a police cruiser slowly driving down the street. She didn't think much of it at first. After all, she wasn't doing anything wrong. But as the car pulled to a stop near her stand and 2 officers stepped out, she felt a flicker of unease. Her father's words echoed in her mind, "The world isn't always fair, Jasmine. But you have the power to stand your ground." Little did she know, this moment would be the start of an ordeal that would test everything she believed in. Her lemonade stand, born out of hope and determination, was about to become the epicenter of a conflict that would challenge her community and reveal hidden truths about those closest to her. Challenges from peers and initial conflict. The afternoon sun shone brightly over Oakwood, casting long shadows on the bustling streets. Jasmine Carter stood behind her lemonade stand, her spirits high as she called out to passers-by. Her cheerful sign, "Lemonade for Charity, $1. Help support disabled children," fluttered gently in the breeze, drawing the attention of pedestrians. Some stopped to buy a cup, offering words of encouragement or a smile. Jasmine's heart swelled with pride. She felt she was doing something meaningful, something that could ripple outward and make a difference. But not everyone shared her enthusiasm. As Jasmine handed a cup of lemonade to a neighbor, she noticed a group of boys approaching. They were her classmates, members of the high school football team, known for their loud antics and a reputation for being troublemakers. Jasmine's stomach tightened. She had never had much interaction with them, but she was familiar with their behavior: cruel jokes, unnecessary taunts, and a general disregard for anything that didn't serve their interests. "Hey, look who it is," one of the boys, a tall and burly teenager named Trevor, called out as they neared her stand. "Little Miss Do-Gooder, saving the world one cup of lemonade at a time." The other boys laughed, their mocking tones making Jasmine's cheeks flush. But she didn't let her discomfort show. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and met Trevor's gaze head-on. "That's right," she replied evenly, her voice steady. "Every little bit helps. Would you like to buy a cup? It's for a good cause." Trevor raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting such a calm response. He glanced at his friends, who smirked and egged him on. "A good cause, he said, leaning against the edge of her table. "What kind of cause is so important that you'd waste your time standing out here like this?" Jasmine felt a spark of irritation but kept her composure. "The proceeds are going to the community center," she explained. "They need funds for repairs and programs that help kids in the neighborhood." Trevor snorted. "The community center? You mean that run-down place where all the rejects hang out? Come on, Jasmine, you're better than this." The dismissive tone in his voice stung, but Jasmine refused to back down. "The community center is a safe space for a lot of kids," she said firmly. "Not everyone has the same opportunities we do. This is my way of giving back." Another boy, a lanky teen named Brandon, chimed in. "We're raising money too, you know," he said, holding up a clipboard. "For new uniforms for the football team. At least that's something useful, not like helping a bunch of cripples." Jasmine's hands clenched into fists at his words. The casual cruelty in his tone made her blood boil. But she remembered her father's advice: stay calm, speak clearly, and don't let them rattle you. Taking a deep breath, she forced herself to respond evenly. "Helping people who can't afford healthcare is important," she said. "But I'm sure your uniforms are important too. Good luck with your fundraiser." Her calm and composed response seemed to catch the boys off guard. They exchanged uneasy glances, their laughter fading. After a moment, Trevor muttered something under his breath and pushed off the table. "Whatever," he said, waving her off. "Good luck with your lemonade stand or whatever." The group shuffled away, their bravado noticeably diminished. Jasmine watched them go, a mixture of pride and relief washing over her. She had stood her ground and refused to let their negativity deter her. It was a small victory, but it felt significant. As the afternoon wore on, Jasmine couldn't help but replay the encounter in her mind. She had always known that not everyone would understand or support her efforts, but experiencing that hostility firsthand was a stark reminder of the challenges she would face. It wasn't just about selling lemonade, it was about confronting the biases and prejudices that ran deep within her community. Jasmine's thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of an elderly woman, Mrs. Johnson, who had been one of her first customers. The kind neighbor placed a reassuring hand on Jasmine's shoulder. "Don't let them get to you, dear," she said softly. "What you're doing is wonderful, and don't you forget it." Jasmine smiled gratefully. "Thank you, Mrs. Johnson. That means a lot." The woman nodded, slipping a few extra dollars into the collection jar before walking away. Jasmine felt her spirits lift. The encouragement from people like Mrs. Johnson reminded her why she had started this project in the first place. But the encounter with the football players wasn't the only challenge Jasmine would face that day. Trouble was brewing, and it would soon arrive in the form of a police cruiser rolling down the street. For now, though, Jasmine remained focused on her goal, unaware of the storm that was about to descend on her simple lemonade stand. Little did she know, her father's words of advice, words she had clung to during her confrontation with the boys, would soon be tested in ways she could never have imagined. The arrival of the police would turn her quiet act of charity into a flashpoint for controversy, exposing the hidden tensions within the community and setting the stage for a confrontation that would change everything. Encounter with Police Chief Ryan Callahan. As the afternoon sun began its slow descent, casting golden hues over the streets of Oakwood, the peaceful ambience around Jasmine Carter's lemonade stand was abruptly interrupted by the low hum of a police cruiser's engine. The familiar sound caused Jasmine to look up, her brow furrowing slightly. She hadn't expected any trouble. After all, what harm could there possibly be in selling lemonade for charity? The cruiser came to a stop a few yards away from her stand, its presence both imposing and out of place amidst the neighborhood's serene surroundings. The car's door opened, and out stepped Police Chief Ryan Callahan, his weathered face set in a stern expression. Following him was Officer Malcolm Green, a younger man who looked hesitant as he adjusted his belt and surveyed the scene. Jasmine felt a flicker of unease. Her father's warnings about how the world wasn't always fair echoed in her mind. "Stay calm, speak clearly, and don't let them rattle you," Marcus had told her countless times. Those words now felt like a lifeline as she prepared herself for whatever was about to happen. Chief Callahan walked toward the lemonade stand, his heavy boots crunching against the pavement. His imposing stature and no-nonsense demeanor exuded authority, but there was something in his narrowed eyes that set Jasmine on edge. He stopped a few feet away, crossing his arms as he examined the setup. The bright yellow tablecloth, the cheerful sign, the collection jar, it all seemed so harmless, so innocent. Yet, his expression suggested otherwise. "What's going on here?" Callahan barked, his tone more accusatory than inquisitive. Jasmine straightened her shoulders, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "Good afternoon, officer," she said, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. "I'm selling lemonade to raise money for the community center. It's for charity." Callahan's eyes narrowed further as he took a step closer. "Do you have a permit for this operation?" he demanded. Jasmine blinked, caught off guard. "A permit?" she echoed. "I didn't know I needed one. It's just a lemonade stand." "Just a lemonade stand," Callahan repeated, his voice dripping with sarcasm. He gestured toward the pitcher of lemonade and the stack of paper cups. "And I suppose the health department knows you're serving drinks to the public? Or the business licensing office?" The implication in his words made Jasmine's stomach churn. She could feel the eyes of passers-by on her, their curiosity turning into concern. A small crowd began to gather, their murmurs blending with the gentle rustling of leaves in the breeze. Officer Green shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting between Jasmine and Callahan. "Chief," he began, his tone cautious, "maybe we should." "Not now, Green," Callahan snapped, cutting him off. His gaze remained fixed on Jasmine. "Young lady, I'm going to need you to shut this down immediately." Jasmine felt a surge of panic, but she forced herself to remain calm. "Sir, I'm sorry if I've done something wrong," she said, her voice steady despite the lump forming in her throat. "I can pack up if I need to, but could you please explain what the issue is?" Callahan's face darkened, his voice rising. "The issue is that you're operating an unlicensed business and potentially endangering public health. This is a violation of local regulations." Jasmine opened her mouth to protest, but Callahan didn't give her a chance to respond. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back," he ordered, reaching for his handcuffs. The crowd gasped, their murmurs turning to exclamations of disbelief. "She's just a kid," someone shouted. "This is ridiculous," called another. Jasmine's heart pounded in her chest as Callahan grabbed her arm and spun her around. The cold metal of the handcuffs bit into her wrists, and she bit back a cry of pain and humiliation. Tears pricked at her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She wouldn't give Callahan the satisfaction. As he began reciting her Miranda rights, Jasmine's mind raced. She remembered her father's words, "If you need me, call. No matter what, I'll be there." But how could she call when her hands were literally tied behind her back? She felt a swell of anger and frustration. This wasn't just about a lemonade stand, it was about something much deeper, something she had always sensed but had never experienced so directly. Meanwhile, Officer Green stood frozen, the conflict evident on his face. He knew this wasn't right. Arresting a teenage girl for selling lemonade? It was an abuse of authority, plain and simple. But speaking up against the chief was a risk that could cost him his career. "Chief," Green tried again, his voice low and urgent. "This isn't necessary. She's just a kid. We could." "Enough, Green," Callahan barked, his voice echoing over the murmurs of the crowd. "I don't need a lecture from you. This is about maintaining order." Jasmine caught sight of Mrs. Johnson, her earlier customer, pushing through the crowd. The elderly woman's face was pale with worry as she approached. "Jasmine, honey," she called, her voice trembling. "Do you want me to call your father?" Jasmine nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, please. Tell him I need him." As Mrs. Johnson pulled out her phone, the scene around them grew increasingly chaotic. More neighbors arrived, their expressions ranging from confusion to outrage. Phones were raised, their cameras capturing every moment of the unfolding drama. The tension in the air was palpable, like a storm about to break. Inside the patrol car, Jasmine sat in stunned silence, her hands still cuffed behind her back. The hard plastic seat pressed uncomfortably against her, and the muffled sounds of the crowd outside reached her ears. She felt a mix of fear, anger, and humiliation. How had something so simple, a lemonade stand, led to this? Outside, Officer Green was locked in a heated argument with Callahan. "Chief, we're supposed to protect the community, not terrorize it," he said, his voice firm despite the risk of insubordination. "This isn't law enforcement. This is harassment." Callahan's face turned a deep shade of red. "You questioning my authority, Green?" he snapped. "Because if you are, you can hand in your badge right now." But Green stood his ground. He knew this wasn't about regulations or public health, it was about Callahan's frustrations with the changing demographics of the town. It was about power and control. As the confrontation between the two officers escalated, Jasmine took a deep breath and whispered to herself, "Stay calm. Dad will come. He'll fix this." She didn't know it yet, but her father was already on his way, and his arrival would change everything. The arrest and its immediate aftermath. The afternoon air, once filled with the laughter of children and the hum of neighborhood activity, now bristled with tension. Jasmine Carter sat in the back seat of the police cruiser, her wrists bound by cold metal cuffs, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and disbelief. The hard plastic seat beneath her was unyielding, and the small, confined space felt suffocating. Outside, the murmurs and shouts of the gathered crowd painted a vivid picture of the chaos her arrest had unleashed. Jasmine had never felt so powerless. Her simple act of charity, selling lemonade to raise money for the local community center, had somehow escalated into this. She could hear snippets of conversation from the growing crowd. "She's just a kid. This is ridiculous. What's wrong with selling lemonade?" The outrage was palpable, but it did little to ease Jasmine's growing anxiety. She thought of her father, Marcus Carter, and the countless times he had prepared her for moments like this. "The world isn't always fair," he'd told her. "But no matter what, you have to stay calm and think clearly." Those words echoed in her mind now, a lifeline she clung to in the face of injustice. She had done nothing wrong, and yet here she was, handcuffed and treated like a criminal. Outside the cruiser, Officer Malcolm Green was locked in a heated argument with Police Chief Ryan Callahan. Green's usually calm demeanor was gone, replaced by a simmering frustration that had been building for months. "Chief," he said, his voice low but firm, "this isn't right. She's a minor, and she hasn't done anything to warrant this." Callahan's face turned red with anger. "You think you know better than me, Green," he snapped. "This isn't about her being a kid. It's about enforcing the law. We can't let people think they can just do whatever they want." Green took a deep breath, trying to maintain his composure. "Selling lemonade for charity isn't a crime, Chief. And arresting her like this, it's an abuse of power." Callahan waved him off, his jaw tightening. "I don't need a lecture from you. If you have a problem with how I run things, maybe you're in the wrong line of work." Meanwhile, inside the cruiser, Jasmine tested the cuffs, wincing as the metal dug into her skin. She took deep, measured breaths, trying to calm the storm of emotions swirling inside her. She couldn't afford to panic. Her father's words rang clear in her mind: "If you ever find yourself in trouble, call me. I'll always come for you." But how could she call when her hands were tied? She closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "Stay calm. Dad will come. He'll fix this." Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of Mrs. Johnson's voice outside the cruiser. The elderly woman, who had been one of Jasmine's first customers that day, was pushing her way through the crowd, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. "Jasmine, honey," she called, her voice trembling. "Do you want me to call your father?" Jasmine nodded, her voice barely audible. "Yes, please. Tell him I need him." Mrs. Johnson didn't hesitate. She stepped away from the commotion and dialed Marcus Carter's number. The phone rang twice before a deep, steady voice answered. "Hello. Mr. Carter, it's Mrs. Johnson," she said, her voice urgent. "There's been an incident. Jasmine needs you. She's been arrested." On the other end of the line, Marcus's grip on the phone tightened. "Arrested?" he repeated, his voice low and controlled, though his heart was racing. "Where is she?" "She's at her lemonade stand," Mrs. Johnson explained quickly. "The police, they said something about permits and health codes. But Marcus, this isn't right. She's just a child." "I'm on my way," Marcus said, his tone leaving no room for doubt. "Stay with her until I get there." As Mrs. Johnson ended the call, Marcus grabbed his car keys and headed for the door. His mind raced as he drove, his usually calm demeanor giving way to a growing anger. He had spent years working to protect people, to ensure justice, and now his own daughter was caught in the crosshairs of a system he had dedicated his life to upholding. But this wasn't justice, it was a gross abuse of power, and Marcus was determined to make it right. Back at the scene, the tension was reaching a boiling point. The crowd had grown larger, with neighbors and passers-by joining to voice their outrage. Phones were raised high, capturing every moment on video. Some people were live-streaming the incident, their voices filled with disbelief as they narrated what was happening. "She's a kid, for God's sake," one man shouted. "What kind of law are they enforcing here?" Another woman chimed in, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Yeah, because a lemonade stand is such a threat to public safety." Callahan, clearly feeling the pressure of the crowd's disapproval, barked orders to Officer Green. "Get this under control, Green. Clear these people out." But Green didn't move. Instead, he crossed his arms and fixed Callahan with a steady gaze. "With all due respect, Chief, this situation is already out of control. And it's because of you." Callahan turned to him, his face a mask of fury. "Watch your tone, officer. I won't tolerate insubordination." Green held his ground. "And I won't stand by and let you ruin a young girl's life for something as petty as this." The standoff between the two officers only added to the crowd's unrest. People began shouting louder, demanding answers and accountability. In the midst of the chaos, Jasmine sat silently in the cruiser, her mind racing. She thought of her father and the strength he had always shown. She thought of the community center and the children she wanted to help. And she thought of the injustice of it all, the unfairness of being treated like a criminal for simply trying to make a difference. Suddenly, a familiar car pulled up to the curb, its engine cutting through the noise. The driver's door opened, and Marcus Carter stepped out. His tall, commanding presence immediately drew the attention of the crowd. Dressed in a crisp button-down shirt and slacks, he looked every bit the professional, but there was a fire in his eyes that hinted at the storm brewing beneath the surface. Jasmine's heart leapt at the sight of her father. Relief washed over her, but it was tinged with apprehension. She knew Marcus would do whatever it took to protect her, but she also knew that his arrival would change everything. This wasn't just about a lemonade stand anymore, it was about standing up against an injustice that had been simmering in their community for far too long. As Marcus made his way through the crowd, the murmurs grew louder. "That's Jasmine's father," someone whispered. "He's here to set things right." The crowd parted to let him through, their eyes filled with hope and expectation. Marcus's expression was calm, but there was a steely determination in his stride. He approached the cruiser, his gaze locking onto Callahan. "Chief Callahan," Marcus said, his voice low and measured. "We need to talk." Marcus Carter's arrival and revelation. The moment Marcus Carter stepped out of his car, the atmosphere around Jasmine's lemonade stand shifted. The tension that had been building in the crowd now transformed into a quiet, expectant hush. Everyone seemed to instinctively recognize that something significant was about to happen. Marcus's calm yet commanding presence was impossible to ignore, and his eyes, sharp and focused, quickly assessed the situation before him. As Marcus approached the patrol car where his daughter sat, his heart clenched at the sight of Jasmine's small, cuffed figure through the cruiser's window. Her face was a mixture of fear and defiance, her shoulders squared as if she were channeling all her courage to endure this moment. He could see the crowd's phones raised, recording every second, and hear the murmur of their voices, a mix of outrage and curiosity. "Who is he?" someone whispered. "Is that her dad?" "He looks serious," another murmured. "Maybe he's a lawyer or something." Marcus ignored the chatter, his sole focus on Jasmine and the two officers standing nearby. Chief Ryan Callahan, red-faced and visibly agitated, squared his shoulders as Marcus approached. Officer Malcolm Green, in stark contrast, appeared uneasy, his expression a mix of guilt and uncertainty. "Chief Callahan," Marcus said evenly, his deep voice cutting through the noise. "We need to talk." Callahan, caught off guard by Marcus's directness, scowled. "And you are?" Marcus met his gaze with unflinching intensity. "Marcus Carter, Jasmine's father." Callahan scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "Well, Mr. Carter, your daughter was operating an unlicensed business and violating health regulations. She's being taken in for questioning." Marcus's jaw tightened, but his expression remained calm. "An unlicensed business," he repeated. "Are you seriously telling me that selling lemonade for charity constitutes a crime?" Callahan's face flushed a deeper shade of red. "It's not just about the lemonade. It's about order, about following regulations. If we let one person break the rules, others will follow." Marcus took a slow, deliberate step closer, his towering presence causing Callahan to instinctively lean back. "Order," he said, his voice low and measured. "What you've done here is not about order, it's about abuse of authority. My daughter is a minor, and she's being treated like a criminal for trying to help her community. This is not justice." The crowd murmured in agreement, their voices growing louder in support of Marcus's words. "Yeah, it's not right," someone shouted. "She didn't do anything wrong." Callahan's hand moved to his holstered weapon, a nervous reflex that didn't go unnoticed by Marcus or the onlookers. The tension in the air grew palpable, and Officer Green stepped forward, trying to de-escalate the situation. "Chief," Green began cautiously, "maybe we should." "Quiet, Green," Callahan barked, cutting him off. "I'm handling this." But Marcus wasn't intimidated. Instead, he calmly reached into his jacket pocket. "You've made a mistake, Chief," he said, his tone steady but firm. "And now, you're going to have to answer for it." Callahan's eyes narrowed, his hand tightening around his weapon. "Keep your hands where I can see them," he barked, his voice rising in panic. Marcus froze momentarily, his hands held out in a gesture of compliance. "Relax, Chief," he said evenly. "I'm not armed." Slowly, deliberately, Marcus pulled out a small black wallet and flipped it open, revealing a gleaming gold badge. Gasps rippled through the crowd as they realized what they were seeing, an FBI badge. "I'm Special Agent Marcus Carter," he announced, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. "And you've just made the biggest mistake of your career." The revelation hit Callahan like a freight train. His mouth opened and closed as he struggled to process what he was seeing. "FFBI," he stammered, the color draining from his face. "That's right," Marcus confirmed, his gaze unwavering. "And as of this moment, I'm officially opening an investigation into your actions. You violated my daughter's civil rights, engaged in racial profiling, and abused your authority. Every word you've said, every action you've taken, it's all on record now, and I will make sure you're held accountable." The crowd erupted in a mix of cheers and exclamations. Phones, already trained on the confrontation, zoomed in on Marcus's badge, capturing the moment for posterity. The murmurs grew louder, and someone shouted, "We've got your back, Agent Carter." Callahan, now visibly shaken, tried to regain his composure. "You can't just walk in here and—" "Enough," Marcus interrupted, his voice sharp and commanding. "You've done enough damage today. Officer Green," he said, turning to the younger man, "release my daughter."
"No."
Green hesitated for only a moment before nodding. He walked to the cruiser, unlocked the door, and gently helped Jasmine out. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, his voice heavy with regret. Jasmine rubbed her wrists where the cuffs had left red marks, her eyes shining with a mixture of relief and gratitude. She ran to her father, throwing her arms around him. "Dad," she whispered, her voice trembling. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. Marcus hugged her tightly, his voice soft but firm. You have nothing to be sorry for, sweetheart. You did nothing wrong. He turned back to Callahan, who was now standing frozen, his earlier bravado completely gone. Chief Callahan, Marcus said, his tone icy, you have two options. You can voluntarily step down and submit to an internal investigation, or I can arrest you right now for violating federal civil rights laws. The choice is yours. Callahan opened his mouth to protest, but no words came out. He looked around at the crowd, at the phone still recording, and at Officer Green, who was now standing beside Marcus and Jasmine. Finally, he lowered his head, his shoulders slumping in defeat. I'll step down, he muttered, his voice barely audible. The crowd erupted into applause, their cheers echoing down the street. Marcus turned to them, his expression softening. Thank you all for your support, he said, his voice carrying over the noise. Justice is not just about laws, it's about standing up for what's right. And today, you all stood up. As the crowd began to disperse, Marcus placed a protective hand on Jasmine's shoulder. Let's go home, he said softly. We have a lot to talk about. Jasmine nodded, her heart full of gratitude and love for her father. She knew this wasn't the end, it was only the beginning of a long journey toward justice and change. But with her father by her side, she felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Community and national impact. The events at Jasmine Carter's lemonade stand quickly became more than just a local controversy, they ignited a spark that spread far beyond the borders of Oakwood. What had started as a small act of charity evolved into a moment that would force the community, and the nation, to confront uncomfortable truths about prejudice, authority, and systemic injustice. The power of social media. Within hours of the confrontation, videos recorded by onlookers began circulating online. The footage of Police Chief Callahan handcuffing a 16-year-old girl for running a lemonade stand shocked viewers across the country. The dramatic reveal of Marcus Carter's FBI badge added another layer to the story, turning it into a viral sensation. Hashtags like #JusticeForJasmine, #LemonadeStandRights, and #OakwoodChange began trending on social media platforms. People from all walks of life chimed in with their outrage and support. Civil rights activists, celebrities, and political figures weighed in, amplifying the story. This is what systemic injustice looks like, tweeted a prominent activist. Even a child trying to make a difference isn't safe from overreach. News outlets quickly picked up the story, broadcasting footage of the incident on national television. The video of Marcus confronting Callahan, calmly asserting his authority as an FBI agent, became emblematic of standing up against abuse of power. Jasmine's lemonade stand, once a humble initiative, was now a symbol of resistance and resilience. Oakwood in the spotlight. For the town of Oakwood, the national attention was both overwhelming and transformative. Residents found themselves at the center of a heated debate about racial profiling, community policing, and the changing demographics of suburban America. Town hall meetings, once sparsely attended, were suddenly packed with passionate citizens eager to voice their concerns and demand accountability. The pressure on local officials was immense. Mayor Evelyn Harper, who had previously maintained a cautious distance from the town's growing tensions, was forced to take a stand. What happened to Jasmine Carter was unacceptable, she declared at a press conference. As leaders, it's our responsibility to ensure that everyone in our community feels safe and valued. Her words were met with both praise and skepticism. Many residents applauded her for addressing the issue, while others criticized her for not acting sooner. Still, the mayor's statement signaled a shift in the town's leadership, one that many hoped would lead to meaningful change. Chief Callahan's downfall. Chief Callahan, once a respected figure in Oakwood, saw his career unravel in the wake of the incident. The public outcry, combined with the federal investigation launched by Marcus Carter, left him with little choice but to resign. Within 48 hours of the confrontation, he stepped down, issuing a terse statement. I regret how the situation was handled, and I believe it is in the best interest of the department for me to step aside. Callahan's resignation was a victory for the community, but it was also a sobering reminder of the work that lay ahead. The investigation into the Oakwood Police Department, led by Marcus and his federal team, uncovered a troubling pattern of discriminatory practices, including racial profiling, excessive use of force, and a lack of accountability. These revelations further fueled calls for reform, both locally and nationally. A community united. Amid the turmoil, Jasmine became a rallying point for the community. Her courage and determination inspired neighbors who had long felt powerless to stand up for themselves. The lemonade stand, once a simple fundraiser, became a symbol of hope and unity. Jasmine, however, remained grounded. While she appreciated the support, she was quick to redirect attention to the cause that had started it all, the Oakwood Community Center. With the help of her father and other volunteers, she organized a town-wide lemonade stand fundraiser. The event spanned multiple neighborhoods, with families, businesses, and even local schools setting up their own stands to contribute. The response was overwhelming. Over the course of a single weekend, the fundraiser raised more than $50,000 for the community center. The funds were used to repair the roof, restock supplies, and expand programs for children and families. The success of the event was a testament to what could be achieved when a community came together. Jasmine's role in the national conversation. As the dust began to settle, Jasmine found herself at the center of a larger movement. Civil rights organizations reached out to offer support and platforms for her to share her story. She was invited to speak at events and participate in panels discussing youth activism, racial justice, and community building. Jasmine approached these opportunities with humility and determination. "I didn't set out to become a symbol," she said during one interview. "I just wanted to help my community. But if sharing my story can inspire others to stand up for what's right, then I'm grateful for the chance to do that." Her words resonated with audiences across the country. Young people, in particular, saw her as a role model, proof that even small actions could lead to big changes. Schools and community organizations began hosting Lemonade for Change events, using Jasmine's story as inspiration to address local issues. Marcus Carter's sacrifice. For Marcus, the aftermath of the incident brought its own challenges. His cover as a quiet, unassuming father had been irreversibly blown, and his role as an FBI agent was now public knowledge. After lengthy discussions with his superiors, Marcus decided to transition to a desk job at the local FBI field office. The move meant giving up the fieldwork he loved, but it also allowed him to stay close to Jasmine and support her as she navigated this new chapter of her life. The revelation of Marcus's identity sparked mixed reactions within the neighborhood. Some residents felt betrayed by the secrecy, while others admired the sacrifices he had made to protect the community. Over time, most came to understand the necessity of his discretion and appreciated the impact of his work. A new chapter for Oakwood. The changes in Oakwood were slow but significant. Under new leadership, the police department began implementing reforms, including mandatory sensitivity training, increased transparency, and community outreach programs. Officer Malcolm Green, who had stood up to Callahan during the confrontation, was promoted to a leadership role. His commitment to rebuilding trust between the police and the community earned him widespread respect. Town hall meetings continued to be well attended, with residents actively engaging in discussions about the town's future. The sense of division that had once characterized Oakwood began to give way to a spirit of collaboration and mutual understanding. Jasmine's continued journey. For Jasmine, the experience only deepened her resolve to pursue her dream of becoming a doctor. She threw herself into her studies with renewed vigor, her passion for helping others now intertwined with a commitment to social justice. She also began planning a youth advocacy group at her high school, encouraging her peers to get involved in addressing local issues. The journey ahead was far from easy, but Jasmine was ready for it. With her father's unwavering support and the backing of a community that had rallied around her, she felt hopeful about the future. The incident at the lemonade stand was a turning point, not just for Jasmine and her family, but for the entire town of Oakwood. It reminded everyone that even the smallest acts of kindness could ignite meaningful change. And as Jasmine prepared for the next chapter of her life, she carried with her the lessons of that fateful day, that standing up for what's right isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. Jasmine's role as a catalyst for change. In the weeks following the incident at her lemonade stand, Jasmine Carter found herself thrust into a role she had never anticipated, a symbol of resilience and a catalyst for change. What began as a humble effort to raise money for the community center had grown into a movement that resonated far beyond the borders of Oakwood. Jasmine, once a quiet teenager focused on her dreams of becoming a doctor, was now at the center of a powerful conversation about justice, equality, and the strength of community action. A newfound spotlight. Jasmine's story continued to spread, amplified by social media and national news outlets. Interviews with her appeared on television, in newspapers, and across digital platforms. She spoke eloquently about her experience, her voice calm and measured despite the whirlwind of attention. Journalists and activists alike were struck by her poise and maturity. "I never expected any of this," Jasmine said during one interview. "I just wanted to help my community center. But if my story can inspire others to take a stand against injustice, then I'm glad to share it." Her words struck a chord with audiences across the country. People of all ages, from young students to seasoned activists, found inspiration in her courage. Schools hosted discussions about the importance of standing up for what's right, and community groups organized events inspired by her efforts. Jasmine's lemonade stand had become more than a fundraiser, it was now a symbol of hope and change. A beacon for youth activism. One of the most profound impacts of Jasmine's story was the way it galvanized young people. Her actions showed that even teenagers could make a difference in their communities. Students from Oakwood High School, inspired by Jasmine's courage, began organizing their own initiatives to address local issues. Some started food drives, while others planned cleanup efforts for local parks. Jasmine, always humble, was quick to support their efforts, offering advice and encouragement. Realizing the potential to harness this energy, Jasmine worked with her teachers and community leaders to establish a youth advocacy group at her school. The group, named Voices of Change, focused on empowering students to identify problems in their community and take actionable steps to address them. Jasmine's leadership and her ability to rally her peers quickly turned the group into a driving force for positive change in Oakwood. "People underestimate the power of young voices," Jasmine said during a meeting. "But we're not just the leaders of tomorrow, we're the changemakers of today. It's up to us to take action and show the world what we're capable of." The town-wide lemonade stand fundraiser. As part of her efforts to support the community center, Jasmine organized a town-wide lemonade stand fundraiser. The idea was simple yet powerful: encourage residents across Oakwood to set up their own lemonade stands, with all proceeds going toward the center. Jasmine enlisted the help of her father, Marcus, as well as local businesses, schools, and neighborhood groups. The response was overwhelming. Families, businesses, and schools joined the initiative, each setting up their own stands with signs that read, "Lemonade for Change." The streets of Oakwood came alive with the vibrant energy of a community united in purpose. Children sold lemonade on street corners, neighbors shared recipes, and local bakeries donated cookies to pair with the drinks. By the end of the weekend, the fundraiser had raised over $50,000. The funds were used to repair the community center's leaking roof, purchase new books for the reading program, and expand after-school activities for children. The success of the event was a testament to the power of collective action and the ripple effect of one person's determination to make a difference. Jasmine's message of hope. Jasmine's growing platform allowed her to share a message of hope and resilience with people far and wide. She spoke at local events, school assemblies, and even a youth leadership conference, where she addressed an audience of hundreds. Her speeches, filled with personal anecdotes and calls to action, resonated deeply with those who heard them. "One thing I've learned," Jasmine said during one speech, "is that even the smallest actions can create big changes. Selling lemonade might not seem like much, but it's not about how big the act is, it's about the heart behind it. When we come together as a community, we can do incredible things." Her words inspired countless individuals to take action in their own communities. From lemonade stands in other towns to fundraisers for local causes, Jasmine's story sparked a wave of grassroots efforts aimed at making a difference. A symbol of resilience. Despite the support and recognition she received, Jasmine remained focused on her original goals. She continued to volunteer at the community center, tutoring younger children and helping with after-school programs. For Jasmine, the attention was never about personal gain, it was about using her platform to amplify the needs of others. Her father, Marcus, played an integral role in helping her navigate this new chapter. His advice, rooted in his years of experience as an FBI agent, was a steady source of guidance for Jasmine. He reminded her to stay true to her values and to never lose sight of the reasons she started her journey. "You've already made a difference, Jasmine," Marcus told her one evening. "But remember, this is just the beginning. Keep pushing forward, and you'll inspire even more people to join you." Uniting the community. The incident at the lemonade stand, while painful, had ultimately brought the people of Oakwood closer together. Town hall meetings became more inclusive, with residents from diverse backgrounds coming together to share their perspectives and work toward common goals. The community center, once a struggling facility, now thrived as a hub of activity and hope. Jasmine's efforts also helped bridge divides between neighbors who had previously been at odds. People who had once viewed each other with suspicion now worked side by side, united by a shared desire to create a better future for their town. Jasmine's lemonade stand had become a symbol of what was possible when people set aside their differences and came together for a common cause. A legacy in the making. Jasmine's role as a catalyst for change left a lasting impact on Oakwood and beyond. Her story continued to inspire, reminding people of the power of resilience and the importance of standing up for what's right. For Jasmine, the experience was a turning point that solidified her commitment to pursuing a career in medicine and advocating for social justice. As she looked ahead, Jasmine knew there would be more challenges to face. But with her father's support, her community's encouragement, and her own unwavering determination, she felt ready to take on whatever the future held. The lemonade stand had been just the beginning of her journey, a journey that promised to leave a lasting legacy of hope and change. Officer Green's redemption and Marcus's sacrifices, a path to closure. As the dust settled on the events surrounding Jasmine's lemonade stand, Oakwood began its journey toward healing and transformation. The chaos of that fateful day had laid bare the systemic issues within the community, but it had also illuminated paths to change. In the aftermath, key figures like Officer Malcolm Green and Marcus Carter became central to ensuring that the lessons learned would not be forgotten. Officer Green's redemption. For Officer Green, the confrontation at Jasmine's lemonade stand had been a defining moment. The young officer, torn between his duty to follow orders and his conscience, had chosen to stand against Chief Callahan's unjust actions. While it had initially put his career in jeopardy, the fallout from the incident transformed Green into an unlikely hero. After Callahan's resignation, the Oakwood Police Department underwent a significant overhaul. A federal investigation, spearheaded by Marcus Carter, uncovered a troubling pattern of racial profiling and abuse of authority. The findings led to widespread reforms, including the introduction of mandatory sensitivity training, increased transparency, and a community advisory board to oversee police activities. Green, who had proven his integrity by standing up to Callahan, was promoted to a leadership role within the department. As the new community liaison officer, he worked tirelessly to rebuild trust between the police and the people they served. He organized town hall meetings, participated in local events, and encouraged open dialogue with residents. Policing isn't just about enforcing laws, Green said during one meeting. It's about protecting and serving every member of the community with fairness and respect. What happened to Jasmine should never happen to anyone, and I'll do everything in my power to make sure it doesn't. His efforts earned him the respect of the community, and while the road to full reconciliation was long, Green's dedication helped lay the foundation for a more equitable future. Marcus's sacrifices and new role. For Marcus Carter, the events surrounding his daughter's lemonade stand had revealed the depth of his dual responsibilities, as a father and as a federal agent. The revelation of his FBI status had upended the quiet life he had carefully built for himself and Jasmine, but it had also been a necessary step to protect her and expose the injustices within Oakwood. In the weeks following the incident, Marcus made the difficult decision to step away from fieldwork. His cover as an unassuming resident of Oakwood was irreparably blown, and he knew that continuing in his previous role would put both him and Jasmine under scrutiny. After discussions with his superiors, Marcus transitioned to a desk job at the local FBI field office. The move allowed him to stay close to his daughter and maintain a more stable presence in her life. While the shift to an administrative role wasn't easy for Marcus, who thrived on the challenges of fieldwork, he found purpose in using his position to advocate for justice and reform. He collaborated with local leaders to address systemic issues within law enforcement, drawing on his own experiences to push for meaningful change. For Marcus, the sacrifices were worth it. Watching Jasmine grow into a confident, determined young woman reminded him of why he had made those choices. His pride in her was immeasurable, and their bond, forged through shared resilience, only grew stronger. Jasmine's legacy and closure. For Jasmine, the experience had been transformative. The once shy and studious teenager had become a powerful voice for change in her community. Her story inspired others to take action, proving that even small acts of kindness could have a profound impact. The town-wide lemonade stand fundraiser, which raised over $50,000 for the community center, marked a turning point for Oakwood. The funds were used to repair the center's roof, purchase new supplies, and expand its programs. Jasmine's dream of helping others had materialized in ways she could never have imagined. But Jasmine's journey didn't end there. She continued to work tirelessly for her community, balancing her studies with her newfound role as a youth leader. Her advocacy group, Voices of Change, became a platform for students to address local issues and make their voices heard. Under Jasmine's guidance, the group launched initiatives to support underprivileged families, promote educational equity, and foster inclusivity within Oakwood. The support Jasmine received from her father, Marcus, and Officer Green reinforced her belief in the power of allies and collaboration. Together, they exemplified how people from different backgrounds and roles could come together to create positive change. A community reimagined. Oakwood, once a town divided by tension and mistrust, began to find its footing as a more inclusive and united community. The police department's reforms, combined with increased civic engagement, brought about a renewed sense of hope. Town hall meetings became a place for open dialogue, where residents worked together to address issues and celebrate progress. Jasmine's lemonade stand, once a modest fundraiser, became a symbol of what Oakwood had overcome and what it aspired to be. A mural depicting Jasmine pouring lemonade, surrounded by children and community members, was painted on the side of the community center. Beneath it, a simple yet powerful phrase read, "Change starts with one small act." A father and daughter's reflection. One evening, months after the incident, Marcus and Jasmine sat together on their porch, watching the sunset. The warmth of the fading light bathed the neighborhood in a golden glow, a stark contrast to the tension that had once gripped their community. "You've come a long way, kiddo," Marcus said, his voice filled with pride. "I hope you know how proud I am of you." Jasmine smiled, leaning against her father's shoulder. "I couldn't have done it without you, Dad. You've always been my rock." Marcus chuckled softly. "You've always had it in you, Jasmine. I just gave you the tools. The rest was all you." As they sat together, father and daughter, they knew the journey wasn't over. There would always be more work to do, more challenges to face. But for the first time in a long time, they felt a sense of closure. The incident at the lemonade stand had been a turning point, not just for their family, but for the entire community. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in twilight, Jasmine felt a quiet determination settle within her. The future was bright, and she was ready to face it head-on, one small act at a time.